BS News.
We know what it's like, that persistent nagging feeling that will only go away when you get away. For those with a passion for travel, there's the new Discover It Miles card. You earn unlimited 1.5 miles for every dollar you spend, and you can fly any airline anytime with no blackout dates. Just buy your ticket and use miles to credit your statement. Apply now and Discover will double your miles at the end of your first year. So go on, scratch that travel itch. Get the new Discover It Miles card today. Limitations apply. Learn more at discover.com/miles.
If you have Medicare Part D, Walgreens can put you at the corner of switching your prescriptions and saving some money. That's because Walgreens makes it easy to switch and save with copays as low as $0 on select Medicare Part D plans. Just bring us your prescriptions and we'll do the rest. Switch to save even more today. Walgreens, at the corner of happy and healthy.
Applies to Tier 1 generics for select plans.
There we go. All right, here we are on 1650 AM, and this is K-Talk, and I'm George Yates, and I'm here with Greg Hall, and this is Justice for All for the next couple of hours. And this is the show where, we talk about legal kind of stuff sometimes. And this day is an interesting one because we have a guest named David Merkatz. I think that's how we pronounce it. And David Merkatz is from Palm Beach County, Florida, and he has written a book called Wrongly Charged, A Look at the Legal System. And David Merkatz was charged with some offenses. He's a locksmith, originally from Brooklyn, New York, Bensonhurst area, I guess, of Brooklyn, New York. And we've got him on the show today. How you doing, David?
Very, very good. Thanks for having me on.
So how's the weather in Florida today?
It's rainy, but it's hot as can be.
Oh, well, that's good. We need some hot here. It's been cold and snowy, and we've got ice on the roads, and it's gnarly. So we would take a little hot and rain, wouldn't we?
Yeah, the whole week it's going to be in the 80s to near 90.
Oh, great. Well, anyway, that's a little too hot. I think I'll stay here if it's going to get that hot. I'm licensed in Florida. I have a law license from Florida from way back when. Practiced law in Tampa for just a short period of time, and this is kind of my hometown. So I moved back up here a few years back, or actually 30 years ago. So I don't practice law in Florida, although I still do keep my license current. Your experiences are all based in the Florida system, which is going to be different from the Virginia system in many respects and similar in others. So let's get started a little bit. With your book is called Wrongly Charged: A Look at the Legal System, and you write it as if somebody you write it almost as if you've become a lawyer yourself in this process. How in the world did you get so knowledgeable about the law in order to write a book like this?
Unfortunately, I've had a minor brush with the law when I was a young person in Brooklyn, New York, and when I came to Florida, I applied for a pistol license, and I was denied. Actually, they gave it to me at first, but then they took it away because I had a criminal mischief charge from 1982, which, because it was over $200 at the time, it was considered a felony. And I had my civil rights restored, and under Florida law, you can't get a pistol if you have a felony conviction. It's in most states like that.
That's right.
But there's exceptions to that rule. And the exception is, this rule shall not apply if your civil rights were restored. Well, my civil rights were restored 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. So anyway, they gave me the license, and 6 months later they decided that I shouldn't have it. My license was revoked, and I challenged them, and I lost. But I don't give up. I read the law carefully. Even though I'm not an attorney, I went to the law library, I did a lot of research on it, and I decided to hire an attorney to file an appeal. And nobody wanted to take the case because they said it wasn't winnable. Nobody's ever challenged the law. I said, I don't care. The law is clear. And I took it to the 4th District Court of Appeal, which I'm sure you're familiar with because you're from Florida. And in 1989, Christmas Eve, on the landmark decision, Merkatz versus the Department of State, I beat them. And they weren't happy about it, but I beat them. And that's how I started getting knowledge with the law. And what happened with me to cause me to write the book is I was in the locksmith business for over 35 years. And it became a very, competitive business. Yellow page advertising disappeared. Then you went on to the Google advertising, which, if you're an attorney, you know how expensive that is. And it just, nothing was bringing in the calls anymore with all the big box stores opening up. So I came up with this idea, and before I came up with the idea, I contacted a criminal attorney, a civil attorney, and a trademark attorney, 3 attorneys, to find out what the consequences of what we were going to do were. And all of them told me that in the event we did what we were going to do, it would be a civil matter. You might be charged with a trademark infringement, or you might be sued. And basically all we did was we picked out 5 of the largest companies in the South Florida area, and we put up a website that had a similar name. For example, if the name of your company was ABC Lock Shop and Security Center, my company was ABC Locksmith. And on our website at the bottom, we put down in small letters, we are not ABC Lock Shop and Security Center. Click here to be redirected to their site. We actually had a link to their site. And we've done it. We had no problems for 7 years. All that changed in August of 2013. It actually started 8 months earlier. And they had set up a sting. What they basically did was, one of the companies we did it to in the town of Palm Beach was friendly with, I guess, a detective over there. And one day the telephone rang, and they said, we need our lock changed. Okay. Sent the technician out. And what happened was, when he got there, they knocked on the door. Locksmith, yes. They asked him if he was from the company, and he said yes. They opened the door. They let him do the job. And when they got done with the job, they said, can we make a check out to you to that company? And he said, no, I'm an independent contractor. You have to pay me cash or a check to my name, and I'll give you a receipt for what you had done. And that was what they did. They gave him cash, $135. And when he got done, he walked out the door, and the police came and knocked him to the floor and said, you're now under arrest for burglary of an occupied dwelling and grand theft. And that's how it started.
Well, hold on a minute. Let me get this straight. You would take a legitimate company like ABC, and you basically would rip them off. Then people would think that they're getting ABC and they got you. Isn't that?
Well, we weren't. In other words, you were
fraud.
Well, that's what they said. It was fraud. However, you got to understand that when the other company had the name registered, they had it registered as ABC Lock Shop as a fictitious name. The name of their company wasn't that either. They had a corporation of completely different name, and all they did was file a fictitious name.
But what would be happening actually, though, ABC Locksmith and Security, or what you were saying, they had been in business for what, probably 20, 30 years, or
correct,
or generations.
You're right.
For all you know, that would have been a father, grandfather type
You're
business.
Absolutely right.
So you picked the most venerable and respected company in the whole county. And did you use the same kind of logos? I mean, did you actually...
No, absolutely not. That's what I was going to tell you. Our website was totally different, looked nothing like it. It just was a similar name. And they never said that we used the exact name. And under normal circumstances, and again, we checked with attorneys over this, and all of them said it's not a criminal act. Worst comes to worst, you're going to get hit with a large lawsuit, a civil offense.
Right.
And I wasn't afraid of that. If somebody's going to, because we did it for 7 years, I want you to know, with 4 or 5 companies. And again, it wasn't the exact name. And was it nice to do? Never said it was nice. But every time you turn on the TV, and I turn on the TV also every day, there's one company suing another for them coming out with a product that's similar to theirs and infringing on their, good name.
Right. Well, let me ask you a quick question. Let's assume, for the sake of our discussion, that it's a civil crime or a civil offense. You admit that what you were doing was actionable civilly, and that they could have sued you and prevailed. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There was no question in my mind.
What cause of action civilly would that be, or did your attorneys advise you that would be?
They would probably get an injunction, and that would be about it. Because, see, the problem was under Florida law...
They couldn't sue you for damages? Wouldn't they be able to sue you?
It's very hard to prove. It's very hard to prove because here's the problem. They also only had the name registered under the Fictitious Name Act. And again, I'm not saying it's a good law in Florida, but the law is very clear. The law says registration under this act does not reserve the name for future use. And it even goes on to say the department will register many names that are similar or like that. And if you don't like it, then you should trademark your name. They actually mention that in the statute. So, we didn't pick out companies that had the names trademarked or anything like that.
How much of this is going on today? If you were, you must have gotten this idea from somebody else that had already done it.
Oh, well, it's going on. See, in locksmith,
is it going on today?
It's still going on.
And
yes,
is it going on with other businesses, not just locksmiths, but tire companies and whatever?
Of course.
Wow.
Of course. You got Roto-Rooter, Ready-Rooter, Rapid-Rooter. Everybody's trying to... Listen, it wasn't nice. There's no question what we did wasn't nice. But it didn't resort to burglary charges and money laundering charges and stuff like that. And
well, the burglary charge probably, I'm bringing back my former prosecutor thought, putting on my prosecutor hat.
Correct.
If you obtain possession or obtain entrance to somebody's home under a false pretense, then that can be considered a form of burglary because you're gaining entry under a false guise or false name. So if somebody's calling ABC Locksmith because they think that they're reputable and so on, and then some other person is coming in, then that could be considered perhaps burglary. Was that the rationale behind the criminal charge against you?
But the problem they had with it is that unfortunately, the other company was ABC Lock Shop and Security, fictitious name registered. We were ABC Locksmith, also legally registered in Florida. Was it nice? Of course not. But you can remember, when you go in front of a jury, okay, and you're an attorney and you know what's going to happen, the jury's going to hear what really happened here. And there was no burglary. Absolutely. You're never going to convince a jury to put somebody in jail for 15 years because he stole business from another company, especially when he wasn't a plumber. He was a locksmith. You paid him for the service, and, and ultimately that's exactly what happened. The charges were dismissed on that guy, and it was expunged from the record.
So let's go. So his name was Josh, right? And this is, and I've read your book. And by the way, this is Justice for All. If you've just joined us, we're with David Merkatz, and he's written a book called Wrongly Charged: A Look at the Legal System. And he's in Florida, and he was a locksmith, and he was running a little bit of a, I guess you call it would you call it a scam, David?
That's what they called it.
Okay.
But,
you were running a little scam. You were running a little scam on the web, trying to impersonate a reputable locksmith. Not that you weren't reputable, but you just didn't have the business. So you took the big company and you kind of made it look like you were the company. You'd get the phone call. You'd send out your independent contractor and take a little money off the top for yourself. And apparently somebody in the Palm Beach County Police Department got wind of it and said, we're going to bust this guy on this. And so your independent contractor guy got busted, as you've said, and then later they charged you. So tell us how your journey through the Florida legal system began. You wrote a book about it. You got arrested, or they actually brought a warrant out against you. You turned yourself in on it and got bonded, the whole thing. Tell us your experience, right?
Well, basically, what happened was on an 8-month investigation went on. And I don't want to tell you how much money was spent, but it was more than what they would have charged for murder charges. I mean, they spent, town of Palm Beach is going to pay a fortune over it. And they accomplished really nothing because all they did is take the taxpayer money, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to spread the word. The charges were all false. It should have been a civil case. But anyway, what happened was in August, I knew after the two other independent contractors were arrested, they were going to try to come after me. After all, I was the bad guy. And I got a call from my attorney in August of 2013.
Who was your attorney?
A very good one, Tyler Harding in Boca Raton, and he also used Elliot Lupkin in Fort Lauderdale. I hired 2 attorneys.
Okay, because I noticed at the end of the book, your conclusion, you talk about the ultimate result of your case, which we're not going to get to right now, but you mentioned on that you met with the prosecutor whom you refer to as Bill. When
Correct.
you say you met with him, were you by yourself or were you with counsel?
No, with the attorney, of course.
All right. You didn't mention
happened
that
to be
you...
a very nice prosecutor, I want you to know. He was a very nice guy.
Okay.
You know, I have no bad to say about anybody. They were all doing their job.
So what did you get? What were the criminal charges against you?
Well, when my attorney called me up, he said there's a warrant for your arrest, and they want instead of, which I thought was very nice. I want you to know they could have come to the door and made a scene. Okay, and they didn't do that, which I give them, a lot of credit for. It was a very nice thing to do. And they said they wanted me.
It wasn't a violent crime. That's not
correct.
unusual.
But Florida has loves to send over warrant squads and break doors down. They have a bad reputation for that, and unfortunately, sometimes it results in somebody getting hurt unnecessarily for a white-collar crime. It happens every day here. So I was very happy they did it that way. And he wanted me to turn himself into him, which wasn't going to happen. He wasn't going to get the credit for that. So I called up a very well-known bondsman here in Florida who I know very well, and he found out what the charges were, which they were money laundering, an organized scheme to defraud, and impersonation, and he found out the bond would be $19,500. And I said, that's no problem. So what we did is, I met with the guy and I took care of the paperwork. And a couple of days, I had told the officer I was going to surrender to him, which obviously wasn't going to happen. I went over to the West Palm Beach jail, turned myself in, and wasn't a bad experience at all because record time, 4 hours and 30 minutes, I was out. Bonded out and all done because I had all the preparations done. But that's when your nightmare begins afterwards. It's not before.
So you got your charges, and then they set you a court date. And how long? When were you first arrested? What date are we talking about?
Well, I was never actually arrested. I did a voluntary surrender, which was I think the first week of August. I think it was August 12th to 13th.
All right,
something like that.
So a little bit less than 2 years ago, this is all started.
Yes.
And so what happened then? Tell us about your journey through the Florida court system.
Okay, so basically your next step, and I don't have to tell you because you're aware of it, is you'll get a court date for an arraignment, and anybody that has an attorney never goes to their arraignment if they're bonded out. The attorney files a waiver, and so we didn't go. And I knew, and again, I was very nervous. There's no question I was very nervous about it, but I knew that those charges were never going to stick, and every attorney I talked to said the same thing. But you're the one spending all the legal fees, and win or lose, you lose, because even if you are found not guilty or you take a plea, you don't get an apology and you don't get your money back, unlike in a civil case. And laws need to be changed for that. But what happened was the next step was they sent a package to the attorney. And when they sent the package, there was a plea offer in there. And when I saw the plea offer, that made me feel better. Because I got to be honest with you, when I saw what they were looking for in the plea offer, which was no jail time and probation, just for pleading guilty to the charges, which I had no intentions of doing, that told me their case was weak. Because those charges are very serious charges. And they just wanted to teach a lesson to people.
So was it a plea offer to plead to the felony and get all probation?
Plead to the felonies. They would offer a withheld adjudication, which I'm sure you're aware what that is, and no jail time. And when I heard that as the first offer, I wiped my head, as you can imagine, because I knew now.
They offered you a withhold adjudication on the first day.
Yes. So that told me right then and there, and you being an attorney, that the case was weak because 2 felony charges, very serious felony charges at that, they weren't looking for jail time. So that which I had no intentions of doing any jail time. If that was the case, we go to trial and they would have lost because, I know they would not have won the case. But unfortunately, going to a trial, I don't have to tell you, when you give a retainer to an attorney, it's just the beginning. It can cost you, for a trial like that, maybe $25,000 to $50,000 more. And it's great to have a jury come back and say, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. But then you're still out the $50,000 or whatever you paid the attorney. So going through the system... Wow,
those attorneys in Florida charge a lot of money for these crimes.
What I paid in attorney fees, I don't even want to tell you. I was taught a good lesson. And, unfortunately, they would never do this again because what they spent on this case to accomplish zero, that's what they accomplished, zero, just teaching a lesson and costing money. Because they're not going to stop anybody from imitating a company by arresting them. That's not the way to handle it.
But maybe they do. I mean, wasn't your case highly publicized?
Oh, I was. Yeah, well, I was the front page of the paper. You thought I would have been a murderer.
Well, right.
I gotta be.
So let's back up a little bit. What you did was, by anybody's agreement, was not a good thing to do. It was a bad
Absolutely.
thing. All right. And your position is that it was civil and not criminal. But in the end, if you were prosecuted criminally, and then that was made well public in the newspaper, well, certainly people might think twice before committing that same type of offense again against other legitimate businesses. Aren't we agreed on that?
Actually, with the outcome of the case that they got, no, because the outcome of the case was very unfavorable for them, because the two other people, aside from me, got nothing. Zero.
Right, but you ultimately, in the case, pled to misdemeanors,
right,
and with a period of probation. In fact, you're still on that probation, right?
It was just amended, actually, to administrative, yes.
Right, so you still, as long as you're on good behavior and keep your nose clean in the next couple of years, then these charges will be dismissed, right?
Well, it's a withheld adjudication, actually.
Right. Well,
so I got, they're minor charges. A petty theft charge
right.
is a misdemeanor.
Well, in our jurisdiction and in Florida, a withhold adjudication, and correct me if I'm wrong in your situation, but ordinarily when someone comes and gets a withhold, they stipulate that there's sufficient evidence to find them guilty. Ordinarily, they're either pleading guilty to it and admitting, yes, I am, in fact, guilty of this charge.
Of course.
So you had did you stipulate that there was sufficient evidence to find you guilty as part of your withhold?
Well, when you plead, you know how it works when you go in front of a judge. When you take a plea, they go through that routine.
Right.
Are you pleading guilty because you are in fact guilty?
And did you say that?
And you know that people plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit every day just to avoid a trial and to save themselves $50,000. I got to be honest with you. If they would have said to me, "Go for a trial, and if I win the trial, we'll pay all your legal fees," I wouldn't be standing here today. I would have won the case. There's no question this case was winnable. Just that the thought of taking a risk that somebody on the jury might not have liked what I did, which could happen, and they would find you guilty because they just felt what you did wasn't nice.
Right. Well, and we had actually, I'm here with my producer, Greg Hall, and engineer D, and we actually had a show last week where we talked about that most of the entire show last week, about guilty pleas and where innocent people are found guilty and where innocent people will sometimes even plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit because the evidence is overwhelming. They don't want to go to trial. They can't afford the expense and so on and so forth. But in your case, when you just asking, we're going to go to break in just a minute. And those of you who have just joined us are with David Merkatz. Is that pronounced correctly, David?
Merkatz, yes, you actually pronounced it right.
Right. Well, when you came in and pled to these misdemeanors, 6 of them, did you say that you were in fact guilty, or did they let you take what they call an Alford plea?
No, I actually didn't have a problem with pleading guilty to misdemeanors.
Okay, so the
I have
judge,
no problem at all.
The judge went through the little colloquy with you, and at the end he said, "And you understand you've got the right to a trial, but you're going to, and are you in fact guilty?" And you said, "Yes, I am."
Of course, but I got to be honest with you. The 6 people I pled guilty to, I've never seen them before in my life, and I've never taken a dime from them. And I would, be glad to have them identify me. They never saw me before. But the thought of paying a small fee just to get rid of a case that, without. Unfortunately, the way the system works, it's stacked up against you.
I don't blame you. And I've had many cases very similar to yours, and I would certainly have recommended that you take the same deal and disposition. We're going to go to a break here. It's a fascinating interview here with David Merkatz, his journey through the Florida legal system when he, as a locksmith on the wrong side of an internet kind of little fraud scheme. But we'll come back and we'll talk with him in the next 30 minutes. So join us in just a few minutes.
If finances are holding you back from enrolling your kids or grandkids in private Christian schools, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several schools on the peninsula and the south side that allows us to offer a 35% discount off tuition for preschool through the 12th grade. Give us a call today at 488-1010 or visit our website at tuitionsolution.org. Did we mention we added daycares to the site? tuitionsolution.org.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads. They specialize in vinyl design shirts, apparel, window stickers, cups, and other specialty gifts. They also have rhinestone and embroidery designed apparel, and they offer Pandora-style beads and hardware to create a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more caters to businesses, sports teams, churches, groups, and family reunions. They also offer a great fundraising package should you be in need of money for a special project. And they also do home parties if you and your friends would like to get together and make your own creations. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more can be reached at 757-255-9140. That's 757-255-9140. Email them at rmdesigns11@aol.com or find them on Facebook at RM Twisted Designs. You can also place orders directly off their store at storeenvy.com/RM Twisted Designs.
Hi, this is Greg Bigaveras. Join me for Sports Scene each Wednesday from noon to 1 right here on News Talk 1650 WHKT. You can also hear the show on TuneIn as well. We will talk to local, regional, and nationally acclaimed sports guests, and we'll interact with our audience as well at Greg Bick on Twitter. Sports Scene, Wednesdays from noon to 1 right here on 1650 AM.
Okay, we're back with Justice for All. I'm George Yates. I'm here with my producer Greg Hall and Dee Thomas, and we're actually having a lot of fun here today, interviewing the author of Wrongly Charged: A Look at the Legal System. David Merkatz is the author, and he's with us today. He's a locksmith from what is it, Bensonhurst area of Brooklyn?
Well, originally I'm from Bensonhurst. I actually live in Coconut Creek now.
Yeah, so he lives in Coconut Creek, Florida, which is in Palm Beach County. Is that where you are now?
No, it's actually Broward.
Broward
The incident yeah.
Broward County. So anyway, you know, if you've just joined us, we've been talking with David about his journey through the Florida legal system when he was arrested for he had actually done he had set up some websites that looked like reputable, established locksmith companies when actually they weren't. The phone numbers were coming to David's company, and he was doing it for 7 years without even being caught. Or did the other companies know that this was going on before somebody finally blew the whistle on you and had you arrested for it?
Let me explain something to you. They did know it was going on, and just so you know that these websites were up there legally. And I had an incident with one of the other companies in Broward County, and the police called me, and, you know, they said, you know, honestly, what you're doing is not nice, but it is 100% legal. If they want, they got to sue you. It's a civil matter. So even the police all around knew, and they were very aware of it. And, you know, suing people...
Let me stop you just a little bit here now. What is the cause? I understand that you say injunction, but injunction legally is just a remedy. You know, like when you sue somebody, you can either stop them from doing it, you can make them do something, or you can sue them for money damages, which you said obviously is speculative because you can't really show how much the business is lost. But
correct.
What is the civil cause of action? In other words, would it be intentional interference with a business? Would it be interference with contract? Would it have been fraud? What was the civil cause of action that they would actually file against you? What was the civil wrong?
It would have been tough because, you see, using a similar name, you know, especially when you don't have it registered, it's, you know, it happens every day. You know, unfortunately, I mean, if you turn on the news every day, somebody comes out with a service or a product, and there's another company imitating it, and this one's suing this one. But it's never anything where the police get involved. And big companies do it every day, and nobody makes a big deal about it. It's only when a small guy does it, they try to, you know, make it a big deal.
I think maybe a tortious interference with business prospects or wrongful interference with a business Because if I've got a website up there, then it all looks as my company, and then you've come in and you've taken a website that looks exactly like mine, then you've basically interfered with my business. So, and you were doing that for years.
Actually, it wasn't the way you say. My websites looked nothing like the other companies. The name was similar, but if you would have put the two websites together, they didn't look anything like it.
So from the time you got arrested in August 2013, how long did it take before you ultimately ended up in front of a judge with a plea agreement?
It's funny because it was Valentine's Day, February 14th of 2014. I'll never forget the day.
So it was about a 6 to 7 month process. Let's see, September, October, November, December, January, February. Okay, 6 months.
It was quite quick, actually. You know, being an attorney, they can take a year or more. But, the judge herself, looked at the case, and, she also knew something wasn't right here, from going to misdemeanor from that knew. But, unfortunately, judges don't get involved in cases. Deals are always made every day.
Right.
And I wish the judge would have sat and read the case. And the new judge on my case wants to read my book. He thought it was it's getting a lot of publicity here. And, my new video that came out today, a couple of weeks ago, as I just looked at, has over 70,000 views on it. So it's a very hot topic.
Well, and you weren't ordered to pay any restitution of any kind.
Yes, I was.
Oh,
yes, I was. Oh, yeah, I'm very candid about it. There was restitution due, and again,
how much?
Paid people. It was about $4,000. Okay,
and to how many
which it goes to show you that's over the petty theft amount. So the whole case was. That's why the judge was looking through this thing. Something wasn't right, and she knew it. She accepted the plea, but she knew when the whole thing was not good. The case was a bad case. But unfortunately, judges rubber stamp whatever the prosecutors want in most cases, especially on white collar.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you've got the felony charges against you, the money. What was the basis of the money laundering?
Okay.
I get the burglary, false
pretense.
pretense.
Okay, let me explain to you. Money laundering, people get, they think federal money laundering. In Florida, this is a new game they're playing. They came out with a statute, money laundering, and everybody's a money launderer in Florida because if you're found guilty in Florida of any crime that you made money off an illegal activity. So if I'm guilty of organized scheme to defraud, then the jury would have had to come back with a money laundering because I made money off an illegal crime. It's not that you washed money like, taking money and you're washing cash and making, people don't understand that Florida is a crazy money laundering. Everybody's a money launderer here.
I see. So just by virtue of there being a crime and money being any kind of economic crime has a money laundering count.
Right, and it's a serious charge, and they can make your bond very high for that. In fact, I even have a section that teaches about certain attachments that can be put on and I checked on that before I surrendered myself, that there was no hold, because any type of a racketeering or a money laundering charge, they can put a Nebbia hold on it, which most people aren't familiar with, but I am, and you can't bond out then. And I made sure before I surrendered myself there was no hold like that.
Right. So how much did it cost you in attorney's fees?
Oh, I'm sure I spent with close to $75,000.
$75,000 to how many
lawyers?
Well,
unfortunately,
on a little case that ended up as a misdemeanor and a withhold.
See, that's the thing that upsets me. And no offense to attorneys, this is the way it works. They take their fee based on the charges.
I'm not charging enough.
Right, you're not. You come to Florida.
I'm telling you. I'm moving back.
You got to understand something. They made an example out of me for something that was mine. I got to tell you something.
Wow.
With all the
this would have been about a $5,000 fee.
Not really,
for a lawyer
because
here.
think about
it. It probably would have been $5,000 up front, and it would have been broken down to misdemeanor, so that would have been it.
But you got to understand, the attorneys look at it. He was the front page of the newspaper. This could be. They could upfile. They could make this into a major case. We're going to get a statewide prosecutor. We're going to do this. We're going to do that.
So there was a lot of publicity, huh? You were front page.
Oh,
news?
yes, which is good for me actually, because now my name is known. It's good. It's good for my book actually. Rather, everybody's looking. They couldn't. I was getting calls.
Are you still in the locksmith business?
Not really. You know, I actually sold it to somebody, and I help them out from time to time. I'm very busy right now because I'm on my second book already.
Yeah, it sounds like you've become a legal writer. I read your book, and then at the end of it, you got another one, and you're going to donate the profits of this book.
Yes, because see, I'm
very
wrongfully
convicted and all kinds of
That's
stuff.
right, because I'm going to donate
a crusader,
a portion.
David.
Well, I am, because I don't believe what you see. Again, I never said what I did was nice. I admit it. I'm not, going to say what I did was nice. But I'm not sorry what I did, and I don't think what I did was criminal, and it goes on every day. And I'm going to give you a little example. I'm not going to mention the name, but a few years ago, a big box store, it was on the news here, I don't know if it was in your area, was taking Tiffany rings and boxing them in Tiffany boxes, and they were counterfeit. To me, that would be criminal, because that's somebody buying an engagement ring for their girlfriend, and it's counterfeit, and it was in a major store. To me, that was criminal. They got a fine.
What store was that?
You want me to mention the name?
Oh, yeah.
Costco. Look it up.
Costco,
if you Google it, the story about the Tiffany rings, you will find that what happened, it was about 2 years ago, if I remember. It was around when I had my problem. They were actually selling in a box that said Tiffany rings, and they were counterfeit. Now, I think that is criminal, because if you went in, what we did wasn't criminal. What we did was come out and put in a lock for you, which was the same lock as the other company would have did. But if you get a counterfeit ring from a major retailer like that, to me, they should have prosecuted it. It's a civil matter. So I couldn't figure it out when it came to me.
You have a chapter in your book about criminal sentencing in Florida, and do they have sentencing guidelines in Florida like in Virginia and in the federal system?
Yes, and the scoring.
And was your crime was it a guidelines offense? So that was this one of those offenses?
Yeah, well,
that's
don't
on the
forget the money
book?
laundering. Unfortunately, the money laundering charge was a second-degree felony. I could have, if I would have went to trial and I was found guilty, and if you were found guilty on one, reading the law the way I read it, I would have definitely been found guilty of count 2, because the judge would have given instructions, and it would have been, they could have sentenced you to up to 20 years. I doubt if I would have got 20 years, but I could have faced 10 years. And I got to be honest with you, I have no way I would have went to jail for 10 years for putting up a website.
Well, but don't the judges do sentencing in Florida? I mean, the jury would just determine guilt or innocence. It's not like
correct.
Here in Virginia, we've got a system that says if you go to a jury trial, not only does the jury determine guilt or innocence, but also the jury does the sentencing, which is always a little scary and chills a defendant's right to go to trial, because they're going, man, if I ask for a jury, this jury could give me 5 years, but judge is probably going to give me probation no matter what if I just plead guilty. But in Florida, if you went in front of the jury, you'd still be sentenced by a judge, right?
Correct. And the judges...
And it would still be an economic crime. Nobody was injured. There were no crimes of violence, no weapons used. Not even a whole lot of money. This was just a kind of a nothing little economic crime, isn't it? I mean, nobody goes to jail for a long period of time for this kind of stuff, do they?
Yeah, but see, the thing is that the problem with the Florida system here, and it's a real problem, and it's a problem all over the place. If you're offered a plea, and again, not the way it works, but it's my belief, that should be what you get if you go to trial, because the problem is that everybody's scared to take a trial because it's automatically you're going to jail. There's never a case where you plead guilty and you get probation. Or if you go to a trial, if I would have tried myself on these misdemeanor charges, they would have asked for 6 months or a year in jail, because I exercised my constitutional right for a trial.
Well, there's true. There's no doubt. We talked about this last week. It's what they call the trial penalty, and there's a lot of...
so when a judge sits there and, gives you that, routine, are you pleading guilty because you're guilty, how I wanted to step up and say, no, Your Honor. I wanted to say, Your Honor, the only reason I'm taking the plea is because if I take the trial, you're not going to give me probation.
Well, didn't Mr. Harding tell you that you could take an Alford plea, or did they say no, you had to admit
Well,
guilt?
You know what? The charges were so minor, petty theft with a withheld, that... there was no. I didn't even want to. Didn't ask for. You couldn't have asked for any better.
Well, I don't know. I get a lot of clients that would come in there and they would say, "Well, I'll go ahead and take this deal to the misdemeanor and the withhold and all that, but I'm not going to get up there and say I'm guilty. Can I just take what we call an Alford plea, which allows you to stipulate to the evidence? Yeah, there'd be enough evidence to convict me, but it doesn't mean I admit guilt. And so the judge will say, "Are you pleading guilty because you are in fact guilty?" And the defendant will say, no. And the judge will say, what, you mean you're exercising your right then to accept the guilty plea even though you didn't commit the crime? You think that this plea agreement is in your best interest and you just want to avoid a trial? And the defendant will say yes. But a lot of times in my jurisdiction, a prosecutor might say, you know what, I'll go ahead and offer this misdemeanor. I'll offer this petty larceny and this withhold, but I'm not going to let him come in and take an Alford plea. If he wants to come in and admit guilt, I'll let him take the misdemeanor. But if he wants to come in and say he didn't do it, then I just assume go to trial on the felony. And that's when a lot of times the clients will go, oh, okay, I'll admit I did it, because that's what the prosecutor demands. Now, did that happen in your case?
Well, I was originally going to plead no contest, and he was hemming and hawing, and I said, you know what,
who was hemming and hawing?
The prosecutor. He was like, here's the problem with the case. The problem with the case was they spent from December of 2012 till August of 2013 with forensic experts, and the cost was so high, they had so much egg on their face.
What did they need to do forensics for? I mean, it was pretty clear that
because they couldn't find me, and they couldn't find out how we had the phones and everything, and I'm a very private person. They couldn't figure out the money that was spent. You can't imagine. And the problem was also is because Florida is such a liberal state that when you go on their website, they give out your federal ID number and your home address. I wouldn't have a corporation in Florida. I choose, Wyoming, because under Wyoming law, there's no information. You can't get the information even with a subpoena unless it's a major case. So they couldn't find me. They were having trouble all over the place figuring out who owned the company.
Right. So are you saying then that after you took this guilty plea that and you're still on probation for it right now, so when is your return date? Sometime in 2017?
Well, I actually went to court a week ago to get a modification because they're not happy about the book because the book tells everything that went on, and
Who's
they're not happy. Very unhappy. But the judge in the case actually wrote in the order that I can travel to promote the book. He actually scolded the prosecution to even mention it. He goes, he can write a book about anything he wants.
So the prosecutor's angry that you wrote a book?
Well, he wasn't angry. He actually wasn't angry. But it was funny that he said to the judge, he says, it's funny, Your Honor, he pled guilty to a crime, and he's writing a book saying he was wrongly charged. And the judge looked at him and kind of gave him I don't want to hear that, because judges were attorneys. You don't become a judge without being an attorney. And everybody that's an attorney knows, and judges know, that people plead guilty every day to charges just as a convenience to avoid a trial and to save money. So the fact that you plead guilty doesn't mean you are guilty, even though you tell the judge that. It's just to get it over with and get it done with, because to sit through a trial and pay another maybe $25,000 that you're never going to see back. Believe me, if I could have saw the money back, I would have said, you know what? Let the state spend the money on a trial because I'm going to win. There's no question. I could represent myself. I'm very smart in the law, and I would have won the case because the attorney knows how I am.
I thought you said a person represents themselves as a fool for a lawyer.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that I could have represented myself, but of course with felony charges. But believe me, I'm very good, and I won cases against Florida, and they had. I believe what they had was they were there to teach a lesson, and I would have got up in front of the jury and explained to them exactly what happened, and I would have told them, just like I say to you, you might not like what I did, but it was never criminal. It was always a civil matter. It was a fight between two companies over similar names, which happens in business every day.
If you just joined us, I'm George Yates, and this is Justice for All, and I'm here with Greg Hall and Dee Thomas, and we're with David Merkatz, who wrote this book, Wrongly Charged, A Look at the Legal System. Let me play devil's advocate just a little bit here, David. I understand you've talked a little bit about, a waste of taxpayers' money and all this sort of thing. But let me ask you a question. When I was a prosecutor, for instance, we would do, let's say you've got a contractor that's out there who is wrongfully taking money and not building people's houses, let's say. In Virginia, that's both a civil crime and it's also a crime. A civil offense, it's also a crime. Isn't it an appropriate exercise of taxpayer money? For instance, in your case, these vendors, these locksmiths, let's say, that were wronged by your behavior, you were saying, well, all they're going to be able to do is sue me and get an injunction. So they've got to go out and spend money, hire lawyers to track you down, sue you. They might not even know who is doing it because, like you said, you were kind of a little shell game there. So these businesses would have to spend quite a bit of their own money to try to catch you. And then at the end, all they would be able to do is enjoin you from doing anything. Why isn't it an appropriate exercise of taxpayer money then to prosecute you if they think they can do it criminally, to protect legitimate businesses from these kinds of scams? I mean, you've admitted that it wasn't nice and that it was a civil wrong, and I think that there's a lot of people that would disagree with you, and they might say, this is a legitimate exercise of a criminal prosecutor's exercise of taxpayers' money to protect businesses from this kind of, let's say, scam. And I'm using it as another example. Let's look at the motion picture industry right now. We got all these people out there, and I've defended some folks in federal court a couple of years back. They had the largest internet piracy business in the world. And they were going in, and they would go to the movie theater on the opening night of the hottest new movie. Somebody would video it. They would come back. They would match the sound to it. It would be high quality. They'd release it on the internet. And the next thing you know, it's around the world. Now, it's certainly a civil thing. The motion picture industry could sue. But what they did was it's a crime. And, of course, these guys went to prison for doing these kinds of things. And I thought it was a little heavy-handed for my clients to go to prison for what they did. It was kind of a hobby. They weren't making any money at it. They were doing it for the fun of it. And I thought I do agree that it was heavy-handed, that they made this a crime. But at the same time, it's happening all over the country where businesses are being protected by the government, let's say, in prosecuting these cases criminally, as opposed to making the business go out and spend their own money and go after you civilly. What do you say to that, as to whether or not that should be done?
Well, unfortunately, if that's the case, then every time one of the major cell providers, which was on the news today, that was the top story, comes out with an infringement against their chip or everything, then instead of Apple or whatever the other company is, they should call the police. Every time there's a dispute over a money dispute, we should stop, suing. We should just call the police. I mean, that's the problem with it. But what needs to be done and would be fair, and it's going to happen, I'm going to be an advocate for this, there needs to be where if the case is dismissed against you or if you're found not guilty, all court costs, attorney's fees, and bond fees are borne by the state. Then they wouldn't be so, we'll just file charges. It's going to cost them a lot of money. And that's my goal, to have these laws changed so it'll avoid prosecutors just to say, we'll file charges, that we spend a little bit of money, we'll just clean out his bank account, and even if he loses the case, or if he wins the case, that's what's going on. People are getting charged with crimes, and they don't have the money. If I didn't have a good attorney, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, loser pays. In England, if you sue somebody in England, the loser pays. So,
even here in Florida, in a civil case, if this would have been a civil case, and you know what? They might have lost the case. There's no guarantee they would have won the case, because there was no question that the websites that were put up were not exact. I mean, right now, if you apply for a renewal of your driver's license, for example, there's the palmbeachcounty.gov to renew it. And then there's .org and .com, and I'm going to tell you something. The three will look exactly the same, with the logos and everything on it, but the others charge more with a little disclaimer. They never prosecuted them, and they're taking more money to do the same service. And their logos are exactly the same. See, our websites look nothing like it. If you put the two together, you could tell that they were totally not even a mention. In fact, we had a disclaimer on the bottom. We are not ABC Lock, Shop, and Security, with a link to click on it. Now, the disclaimer was small, but the disclaimer is small in every disclaimer that you see. So we covered ourselves 100%, and we registered the names with the state. Now, if the state was smart, they wouldn't allow you to register a similar name, and that would be the end of the problem. But they allow it,
Well,
unfortunately.
If you've just joined us, this is Justice for All. I'm George Yates. We're here with David Merkatz. He's the author of Wrongly Charged, A Look at the Legal System. Well, let me just ask you, if you actually, in the end, pled guilty to a misdemeanor charge and you're still on probation for it, how can your book be an accurate name? Wrongly charged. You weren't
because I
wrongly
didn't.
charged.
The charges that were filed were wrong. There was no money laundering, and the other two guys, got nothing. Of course, they had no case. They hired one of the most prominent attorneys in Miami, and he let's go to trial. And when they heard he was going to go to trial, guess what? The case was dismissed. They had no case.
So when did your book come out?
Book came out a week ago, and it's getting a lot of notoriety. It's actually available now. Barnes & Noble picked it up. Books A Million emailed me yesterday. We want to carry it. There's been a lot of people that have been, wrongfully convicted. I have a whole section on that also.
Yeah, you do.
And, I do a good job in the book, not only about my case. It's not just about me. I really did this to help other people and let them know, that if you should get arrested, there are ways of getting out of jail without seeing a judge unless it's a serious charge. A lot of people aren't aware of that. You can cut your time in half or less.
Amazon? Can you get your book on Amazon?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble has it, and Books A Million has it now.
And you're donating 10% of your
10% of the profits, because I'm going to start a fund to help people. There's so many people. I mean, I watch the TV every day. Somebody gets out of jail, the DNA evidence, they spent 16 years for charges they didn't commit.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, my case was never a serious case. They made it into a serious case. But between all the legal knowledge I had, I said, you know what? I'm going to take a bad situation that I went through and try to help others, and that's why I did it.
So where did you do your research for all the innocent people that were found guilty?
I actually made a connection with Barry Scheck from the Innocent Project, and, which he was very happy to provide me because he got mentioned in the book. And, I did all of that with him. A lot of lawyers helped me, but a lot of it I did on my own. I actually did a lot of the law work. I actually have a glossary in the back of the book to help people with terms. It was a very put together. It took me over a year to do it.
Yeah, you have a very interesting idea in the book. You say everybody should have a bondsman's card in their wallet at all times. I like that.
Right.
So I'm going to put in a plug-in for my bondsman. His name is John Weeks. He's with Affordable Bonds, and he's in Virginia Beach. And so if anybody out there wants to put a bondsman's card in their wallet, remember it should be John Weeks with Affordable Bonds. So if you need to, that's who we use in my firm, and they're good. And and you're right. When you've got a bondsman, they're worth gold, because they will immediately, when you've got a situation, you call your bondsman. They know where to go. They'll get in with the magistrate. They'll know the charges, and they'll straighten it out. And sometimes the charges get messed up. They might have there's procedural problems where you might have some bond paperwork that didn't make it from the clerk's office to the magistrate's office or to the jail, and it gets all messed up. But if you got a bondsman that knows their way around, then they'll straighten all that out for you and just say, listen, would you just go get this guy out of jail for me, take care of it? And they will go take care of it. And they're up all night. These bondsmen, they're out there down in the courthouse. They're working all night and midnights and away from their families, and it's a hard job that they go through, these guys. And then I've been wanting to have him on our show, Greg. We need to get a bondsman on our show because, and of course, they've also they're bounty hunters, and they'll go out and find the people that don't show up and those kinds of things too. So, tell us what you know about bondsmen, David.
Well, my bondsman, Mark, is, I had to give him a mention in the book because he's terrific. I mean, this guy's helped me and another family member, unfortunately, in the past. Today everything is electronic, so it's great. They can actually bond you out electronically now. Calling, average person doesn't realize when you get arrested, there's no phone call. There's no such thing if you watch too much TV. The phone call is not allowed until the charges are read to you maybe 8 hours later, okay? And if you pick up that phone, which they barely let you do, and make a call and there's no answer, then, just stay there and, you're done. So that's why either memorize or know a bondsman, because I have a story that happened to a friend of mine in my book also, just over a little traffic stop. And the guy never did anything wrong in his life. They forgot to enter his driving school from one of his prior tickets. And it was a court-ordered driving school. So he was driving around without a suspended license, and he didn't realize it, and they put him in handcuffs, and he called me. He didn't call the bondsman. He says, "Dave, I was arrested." He was crying. He says, "No problem. I got him out in 2 hours because I'm very good at that. I should have been a bail bondsman, but I know the system, how it works, and how to bond somebody out very quickly. And I got him out in 2 hours." He couldn't believe it. It was a misdemeanor, but the point is, you're in jail. It's scary. People don't realize.
Right. So you've got a chapter on that, and you've got some other chapters on this, whether or not to plead guilty or go to trial. And, of course, that's the ultimate decision that you decided to take what was the best deal offered to you. We're going to go take a little break here. We're here with David Merkatz. He's the author of Wrongly Charged, a look at the legal system. And I'm George Yates, and this is Justice for All. We're going to go to a CBS News break and run a few commercials here to pay for our 2 hours. And then we're going to be right back with David Merkatz to talk about what decisions and what goes into deciding whether or not to plead guilty or go to trial in a case.
CBS News, I'm Deborah Rodriguez. If the size of the piles of flowers are any indication, people in Russia are shaken by the murder of a vocal critic of President Putin. The bridge in Moscow where Boris Nemtsov was shot and killed has turned into a makeshift memorial. Reporter Alec Loon.
Many outspoken voices in the Russian opposition are saying that Nemtsov's murder was likely not ordered by Putin himself, but was rather carried out by someone inspired by this overall rhetoric of paranoia that has arisen over the past year.
President Putin has put top police brass in charge of the investigation. Israel's prime minister gearing up for his trip to Washington.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu prayed at the Western Wall ahead of a speech to Congress on Tuesday that is opposed by the White House. Netanyahu said Israel strongly opposes an emerging nuclear deal between the world powers and Iran. Acknowledging disagreements with the U.S., he said it is his duty to speak out against a deal that could threaten the existence of the State of Israel. Robert Berger, CBS News, Jerusalem.
On Capitol Hill, last-minute passage of a bill to keep Homeland Security funded for another week may be a sign of things to come.
The Republicans now are looking as if their agenda is in trouble. The prospects for deals later this year on the budget, on the debt ceiling, all look a lot less certain than they did a week or two ago.
Political strategist Greg Valliere. As if some areas of this country didn't get enough bad weather this winter, WBBM TV meteorologist Ed Curran says there's more on the way for the South, the Midwest, the Rockies, and the Northeast.
Winter weather advisories stretch from Texas all the way up to Buffalo, New York. A winter storm warning for parts of New Mexico and parts of Colorado. And here in the St. Louis area, we have a winter storm warning as well. They could see 6 or 7 inches of snow out of the system.
Here's a guy who wants to get away from it all for good.
George Hatcher is one of 100 applicants still in the running for a one-way trip to Mars.
I'm pretty easygoing. I can work in teams.
A crew of 4 would go in 2024 when they land.
At least once a day, you could get an update that would keep you in touch with what was going on the Earth.
His wife is okay with his decision to explore. They do have a toddler son.
My son would be about 12 years old when I departed Earth permanently.
He says he would drop out of the project
if my children asked me to stay.
But if George Hatcher becomes one of Earth's great pioneers heading for the Red Planet...
No matter what happens to any of us in this life, we do get to see our friends and family again in the next world.
Dave Barrett, CBS News.
Mission Save the Butterflies. Sylvia Fallon at the Natural Resources Defense Council says a popular insecticide is threatening monarchs.
The Roundup has been eliminating milkweed from the monarchs, and that eliminates the habitat that they need to reproduce and survive.
The NRDC has sued the U.S. government. This is CBS News.
If you have Medicare Part D, Walgreens can put you at the corner of switching your prescriptions and saving some money. That's because Walgreens makes it easy to switch and save with copays as low as $0 on select Medicare Part D plans. Just bring us your prescriptions and we'll do the rest. Switch to save even more today. Walgreens, at the corner of happy and healthy.
Applies to Tier 1 generics for select plans.
Okay, guys, when it comes to shaving, you've got to check out Harry's.com. Why pay $32 for an 8-pack of blades? Harry's high-quality German-engineered blades are half the price of drugstore brands. Harry's starter set with a razor, 3 blades, and shave cream is just $15 with free shipping. With promo code 5757, you get $5 off your first order. After using code 5757 at checkout, you can get an entire month's worth of shaving for just $10. That's Harry's.com, code 5757.
Mom and Dad are right. Kids need to turn down the volume.
Health experts warn 1 billion young people around the world are at risk for hearing loss because they spend hours a day listening to music, videos, or other sounds with headphones or earbuds. The World Health Organization says half of all 12 to 35-year-olds listen to unsafe levels on their various devices. Tests show that volumes of 85 decibels for 8 hours or 100 decibels for just 15 minutes can cause permanent damage to the hearing. The average personal device produces a volume of between 75 and 136 decibels. Jim Chenevey, CBS News.
8 cross-dressing thieves have been sentenced from 9 months to 15 years in prison for a heist at the Harry Winston jewelry store in Paris 7 years ago. The gunmen wore wigs, skirts, stockings, high heels. Took the group less than 20 minutes to steal hundreds of pieces of jewelry and watches worth $92 million. Some of it was dug up from a drain sewer 2 years ago. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS News.
If you have Medicare Part D, Walgreens can put you at the corner of switching your prescriptions and saving some money. That's because Walgreens makes it easy to switch and save with copays as low as $0 on select Medicare Part D plans. Just bring us your prescriptions and we'll do the rest. Switch to save even more today. Walgreens, at the corner of happy and healthy.
Applies to Tier 1 generics for select plans.
Geico Motorcycle presents Reflections from the Road.
Let me tell you, the road is a much more relaxing place since I switched to Geico Motorcycle Insurance and started saving money. With that taken care of, now I can think about deep, important things. Like how come it's a pair of pants when there's only one of them? A real brain teaser. But hey, at least saving money with Geico Motorcycle is as easy as pie. What does that mean, anyway?
Geico Motorcycle Insurance. See how much you could save.
Okay, we're back with Justice for All, and I'm George Yates, and we've been here with David Merkatz for the last hour talking about his book, Wrongly Charged, a look at the legal system. And you still with us, David?
I'm still here.
Okay, listen, I've got my producer here, Greg Hall, and when we were getting ready for today's show, we were doing a little bit of research and Googling things around, and we found some other stuff and articles about you, and you got a real colorful history here with stuff. I don't know. Greg wanted to kind of ask you a few questions. It's Greg Hall here.
Yeah. Hey, David. Certainly, you've got your critics online, and I wondered if you would mind addressing some of these things that we found and kind of going.
Oh yeah, some of them are old charges. There was some. Like I said, I had some. That's how I wrote the book. I had a lot of experience with the law.
Yeah, I can see that. Let me ask you something. On this one particular, it's like a New York Times article. It looks like you...
That's the one I addressed earlier with the criminal mischief.
Now, did you actually shoot the windows out of the cars? And, I mean, it looks like you
was two. It was two. Of course, newspapers always make I was young. I was like 20 years old then at the time, 21 or 22. I don't remember. It was over 35 years ago. And what had happened was there was a bunch of companies doing that. And I thought it was fun. I was a young guy, and basically, they made a big deal about it. And I took the plea. When I do something wrong, I don't have a problem with it.
What exactly happened? What happened? Who did what? I don't know anything about this.
Back in the early '80s. There was a lot of companies that were involved in doing that, and they broke some windows and this and that. And what happened was, of course, the small guy always gets in trouble, and I was always the small guy. And I got caught, and I pled guilty to criminal mischief, and it haunts you. If you have a felony conviction on your record, it does haunt you. But there were remedies, and that's another reason I wrote the book. There were remedies to get these things erased or get your civil rights restored, which a lot of people, unfortunately, I did say this in the book, and people don't like to hear this, but there were two types of people in this world. There were people that did something wrong, and everybody has. And there were people that got caught doing something wrong. And unfortunately, I got caught, back then. And I made a couple of mistakes in life, and I'm not, it happens. People do things.
Well, let me ask you a question. Greg has done this research. Were you in the glass business then?
Back then, I had a locksmith and glass business, yes.
Okay, so apparently there was a bunch of windshields. There were like 1,000?
They weren't windshields. Again, those newspaper articles do exaggerate.
Oh,
they
just
don't
glass.
tell the truth.
Just
windows.
windows.
It was just side window here, stuff like that. But they made me into the fall guy because I was the small little nothing, and unfortunately back in the 80s, I picked the wrong person to do it to. I always seem to pick the wrong person. It was a politician.
Well, was it good for business?
Back then, yeah. Well, you got people would come in and have it fixed. It was a business. Back then.
So is that still going on these days? Somebody in the glass business goes out and breaks glass, or somebody in the fire restoration business burns things down?
There was a thing here in Florida a couple of years ago. There were a lot of people getting flats. I guess the tire places were slow. It was amazing that right by the tire places, a lot of people were all lined up with nails in their tires. Things happen. They made a big deal about it, but unfortunately, these things happen all the time.
Yeah, what we need to do then, I do a lot of DUI work. I need to start setting up some checkpoints.
Yeah, well,
and have my card there, and so, hey.
Like I said, I've made a few mistakes in my life, and when I make a mistake, I don't have a problem admitting it. But when I get charged with something that I didn't do I still don't believe to this day I did anything wrong, and I'm not sorry for it. I will never. I told my attorney.
You didn't think it was wrong to shoot out the glass of cars so that you could increase your business?
I'm talking about the current situation. I'm not talking about 35 years ago. But
you didn't think you did. You don't think you were doing anything wrong with this? You knew when you were. And I'm not. Listen, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I respect your book and all of this. But when you knew it wasn't nice, but you also had checked with lawyers, and the lawyers had said that you could be sued for this and probably enjoined. So you knew it was wrong. You just didn't know it was wrong criminally, but you knew that it was wrong civilly, right?
Correct. Civilly is right. I'm not afraid of civil lawsuits because you don't always win. You don't always win.
But
I've been sued before, and most of the time prevailed in the cases.
Okay.
Because they got to prove that my website that I put up was exactly the same as theirs. And the problem they were going to have is that it wasn't the same, and they never registered their name either. And, that fictitious, statute that they have in Florida should be changed. It shouldn't say registration under this act does not reserve the name against future use.
But let me ask you a question. Before you went to this scheme, you were a legitimate locksmith, right? You'd moved from Brooklyn down to Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had been in the Yellow Pages yourself, and you were doing it the correct way, I take it. You had a big Yellow Page ad, as your book says, and everything was cool. You were making money because the Yellow Pages worked. And then the Yellow Pages went away, and people stopped using them, and your business started to die off. You got out of the Yellow Pages. You tried to do this pay-per-click thing with the Google AdWords. It is expensive. And I'm sure the big locksmiths could afford to spend $3,000 to $5,000 a month on AdWords, and you couldn't.
No, that wasn't the case. What happened?
But at some point, you decided to compete unfairly with them. What I'm saying is, shouldn't competition still be fair? And I think that what you did was, you say that you don't think you did anything wrong, but at some point,
it happens every day.
But you found
But
you found that you were unable to compete fairly, so you started to then basically use their names to commit kind of a fraud on the public and on the businesses. How can you
The interesting fact of is that when the most of the customers that were interviewed, their answers were they didn't care. The only ones that cared, because I read the probable cause affidavits and everything, the only ones that cared were the ones that the other company told them. And the police officer did a lot of things that would have come up in a trial. Like, for example, I was sitting in my home one day, and before they actually did the arrest, and I got a call from one of the customers that actually went into the other company, the competitor, okay? and said to me, thinking they were calling that company, they said to me, my name is XYZ, and I just got a call from Detective so-and-so, and he told me I should change my locks. And I said, why did he tell you that? He says, don't you know? The other company is stealing, and they're keeping keys to your house. Right then and there, I knew what this officer was doing. He was calling up customers, going through my accounts, and telling them that we were a scam artist, which we were not. Erecting a site up with a similar name, people do every day. It's not a scam. They were getting a lock job. They paid for it. They got the exact same product. There was nothing inferior about it. But he was calling them up and scaring them. So those were the people that were unhappy. The actual person, when they interviewed them, most of them said, who cares? He did a good job, actually. I was very happy with the work. So people weren't, and a couple of people said that was a great idea. Believe it or not, there are as much people you think that are angry about it. I had a plumber come to me and say to me, boy, I wish you could teach me how to do that for my business because I'm slow too. So there, it works both ways, but it happens every day. And, unfortunately, it's not a police matter, because if it was a police matter, the other police jurisdictions would have got involved. And I challenged them to do that again. I would love to see them try that again and spend all the money that they did, because what they need to do, see, unfortunately, here's the problem. They put a bill in the Florida Senate to regulate locksmiths, license them, and advertising regulations, and it addressed all of the things that I did, and the bill died. So obviously there was no interest. So we don't have regulation, how to advertise, and what's fair and what isn't fair. What's nice is another story, but there is no regulation, and since they don't have regulation, I don't see how they can stop somebody from using a name that's similar.
Well, yes, and again, David, thanks for addressing some of these issues. And
well, listen, I mean, like I said, I didn't do anything that was nice, but business isn't nice. People compete in ways every day. They come out with a chip. This one steals the chip. He comes out with a cheaper chip. It's every day.
Right. Now, that's one thing. Now there are also some allegations. I found a blog and a couple of other links. Did you indeed get caught with wearing a Halloween mask and injecting glue into a lock of a business?
Well, what happened was that's a story that, of course, they have only one side to the story. The press never puts both sides. We had done a job for a big company, and it was a $5,000 job. And when we got done, and we had done work for this company before, and again, I was younger and stupid then. Instead of doing the proper thing and putting a lien on the property and going after them the proper way, when you're young, sometimes you do things. I would never do that today. I learned from my mistakes, costly mistakes that was too. The guy decided after we spent 8 hours there and put on 10 panic bars, we're not paying for the job. And my partner comes out to me and says, "What do you mean he's not paying?" That's not something you tell me 15 years ago that you're not paying. I was young. I got excited right away. What do you mean he's not? Well, he got a price that was cheaper. So I said, you know what? Go in there, because I don't want to lose my temper, and tell him that we'll do it for whatever price he got from the other company, even though he agreed to it. And he comes out and he says, you know what? I just decided you're not getting paid at all now. And I almost did something that I shouldn't have done, which would have been worse when someone says that to me. But what wound up happening, I said to call the police, and the police came out, and this was the funniest part of it. This is what made me go nuts. I went to take my locks off the door. I mean, after all, I had $1,400 in locks on the door. And the cop says to me, listen to this, you can't have your locks back. Once you put them on, you have to take them to court. So in essence, I'm out $1,400 in 8 hours. So back then, not thinking clearly, and my partner warned me about this. He says, don't go back there. I said to my partner, if you think this guy is going to keep a $5,000 job and get away with it, it ain't happening. And I knew he had cameras. So I put on a mask, and I went there, and I glued all the locks that I put in for him. And unfortunately, at the time I did that, there was some other companies going around, some that came from the Middle East that were trying to drum up business, and I got accused of doing it to other companies also, other businesses also. But it was really, that was the company I was trying to get back at. And now I wound up having to pay legal fees for that stupid mistake, and I had to pay him restitution for the damage I did to my locks. So that was a stupid thing to do, but I learned.
Interesting. And so is that where the the allegations or accusations of the Department of Transportation came into play? Because
Yeah, what happened was because that was right around the corner from his thing, so they thought maybe that I had something to do with that. Okay, but again, the news writes whatever they want. Like when they wrote the article about me, they put up the front page of the newspaper that I was some sort of a fake website. There was nothing fake about my website. The websites were legitimately registered. Everything on them were real. There's nothing fake about them. Fake is when you put up a website that looks identical to someone else in order to mislead. My websites didn't say that. They had disclaimers, and if you put the two together, I wish you could have both websites.
Sure.
Because some of them are still up. Okay.
Now, yes, and I see what you're saying. I see the point there. Now, you can see how either some of the critics out there or our listening audience that's hearing this right now, they might say, well, geez, this guy, years ago he shot out a few windshields to get some business. Maybe he glued some locks to get some business, right?
Yeah, well, I get it. I get it. But that's what happened. You wanted the answer. What happened? I told you what happened. And unfortunately, today, when I did what I did, I had a builder that lived next door to me, and he was a Sicilian guy, and he came over to me and he taught me something I didn't know. He goes, Dave, listen, what you should have did, he's in a shopping center. You put a lien. He says, and when you put a lien on his, it liens the whole shopping center, and they can't get their permits and everything. And subsequently, after that happened, I had another incident similar, and I did things the correct way instead of being an idiot like I was that time. And guess what? The owner of the shopping center came to me, whatever we got to do, because Publix was in the shopping center, and they couldn't get their food license renewed because there was a lien on one of the small businesses. But then I wasn't thinking clearly, and I didn't do the right thing, and I paid for my mistake, big time back then. And you got to watch your temper sometimes. Unfortunately, when you're in the service business, people do take advantage of you.
What was the reason behind them just deciding arbitrarily to just say, we're not going to pay you for this job?
Well, and that's what upset me, because we had done work for this company before, and he was a nice guy. And the bill was very high. It was a lot of panic bars. And after we got done, I guess and over the phone in our business and most service business, if you call another service business, they're always going to tell you they would have did it for $500 cheap because they want the job. I'm sure if an attorney would say the same, I would have did it cheaper.
Right, but once they've already contracted with you to go, didn't you have a contract?
And the problem with it is you have two options at that point. You could do the right thing, which would be drive away and take him to court and then lose 3 hours. He's got your locks now and your 8 hours labor. And, I guess you have to be there to realize if you sweated in hot Florida sun for 8 hours and you knew you had given him the price and you did work before, it can cause you to lose your temper. I'm just happy that that's all I did, because at that time I had a weapon on me and I was very upset, and I made sure that I didn't go to that extreme. I mean, I really wanted to get paid. We spent the whole day there. So I was very upset about it, and, I did something I shouldn't have done. I should have taken him to court and wasted 2 days in court, and, courts take forever. That's the problem, to get your money. I didn't know about liens back then. Now I learned. That's a new thing.
Yeah, but once you put the glue in there, you knew you were going to get your money. I mean, there's no way they're going to pay you now.
Here's my thought back then was, you know what? When the police told me at the time that I can't have my locks back, which I couldn't fathom that I couldn't at least have my material back. Forget about the 8 hours labor. I had $1,400 out of pocket on parts. I said, what do you mean? He goes, oh, you got to take him to court. So I start taking the lock off, and he's ready to arrest me. So I'm thinking to myself, now he's keeping my material, too. I mean, I never heard of such a thing. So I was really upset. And I said, you know what, at least for one thing, he's not going to have the joy of using my locks. That was my thought back then, instead of thinking clearly of using my locks and enjoying having all my new stuff for free. So that's why I lost my temper.
Sure. And so what was the result of the Fort Lauderdale incident with the Department of Transportation? What ended up happening with that whole thing? That
had nothing to do with me, but I had to plead guilty on that charge, and I got it withheld because I did do it. I mean, there was no question that I went out there and did it. And, of course, instead of, here's another thing that they do. Instead of charging you with criminal mischief, they charge you, again, with the burglary of an occupant, all kinds of. Now, of course, the charges were dismissed. They were down, they always do that because they want to arrest you and they want to make you pay a lot of money in bail instead of charging you with the proper crime, which it was, criminal. There was no burglary. There was no question. They had it on camera. There was no question I didn't try to get into the place. I was trying to do something to the locks that I put in so that, he couldn't have the use of them.
But
so they dropped those charges.
Oh, they dropped that. But the Department of Transportation, what happened in that case? Did you have to plead guilty to that?
No, it was all combined. No, I didn't plead guilty to the Department of Transportation. It was all combined into one plea for the one case. They just added that into all the articles and everything.
Interesting. Well, you certainly have had you do have a colorful background.
Well, that's how I wrote the book on law, because I've actually had more experience in law than the average attorney has. Being arrested, attorneys don't get arrested, so they know how to help their clients, but they really don't know how to help somebody that gets arrested and how to get out and how to, I've won cases and helped. My own attorney called me up with a shoplifting case, and I helped him beat the case on a technicality because I know how to do research. So I've had a lot of experience. Some of it unpleasant, but you know what? I turned it into a positive situation, and I'm looking to help other people that may go through a similar thing. And don't lose your temper next time. I tell myself, next time put a lien on the property.
So if you've got this this book that you've just written, and you said that it upset some people there in Broward, because it just came out a week ago, and then they said,
but they're all buying it. I want you to know that through the grapevine, I found out that the state attorney bought the book. They're all buying it because they got to read it.
Because their names are in it, I guess, and they have to have
but of course, again, if you've read the book, nothing bad. Everything is nice. I only tell them, I don't say anything rotten about anybody except that they overspent money on a case that they, that's basically what it was.
Right.
And they're not happy, and they know that that's the case.
It's one of these self-published books.
No, actually, because of the notoriety, Prominent Book Publishing called me right before I was going to self-publish it, and they picked it up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because they were getting phone calls. I mean, until I couldn't get the book out fast enough. I actually had to pre-release it as an ebook on January 28th, and I was calling the publisher every day. When is it going to come out? I got people calling me from all over Florida, all over. They heard about it. I don't know where they're hearing about it, but it was on Facebook, and I've done a lot of shows about it. And now that the book is out, I can't get people are calling like crazy because there's a lot of helpful things in there besides my case.
So they're letting you travel to promote the book right now.
Oh yeah, the judge was in favor of it.
Under the terms of your probation agreement, you're ordinarily what? You're not allowed to leave the state
of
Florida?
Well, no. You see, the probation officer, they're law enforcement. And when I told her that I'm going to want to promote the book, she frowned. You can't profit from your illegal activities. I said, it's not an illegal activity. I didn't write a book on petty theft. I wrote a book teaching people how the system works, and it's going to be published whether you like it or not. Well, she didn't like it. So I went to court and got a court order, and the court order is pretty stern, that I can travel to and from, and I don't have to get any type of permission. I just have to let her know where I'm going to be. And that was ordered by the court. The judge was on my side 100%.
So you're on supervised probation?
Just for another 6 months.
All right. And so your probation officer kind of tracks your movements and makes sure that
No, she doesn't bother me at all. Let's call a spade a spade. She knows what happened. She knows that this case should not have been a criminal case, even though she's not going to come and admit it, and nobody's going to admit it. Everybody knows that this was a civil matter turned into a criminal case to try to teach someone a lesson. And the lesson they taught is how to spend taxpayer money on unnecessary charges. One of the cases have gotten expunged. The judge issued a court order to expunge it because they played with the wrong attorney when he got involved from Miami. He doesn't play around.
Are you allowed to leave the state right now?
As long as I tell him where I'm going to go, sure.
Okay.
Because I was invited on a couple of shows in New York. Everybody wants me now. Believe it or not, as bad as you think I am, that everybody wants me.
No, we don't think you're bad. We don't think you're bad. Well, you're very entertaining. We've enjoyed the show. If you've just joined us, I'm George Yates, and we're here with Justin.
I tell it the way it is. I don't lie, and I tell the story the way it is. Some people think that what I did wasn't nice, and other people actually call me up and say, there was nothing wrong with that. People do it every day. Why did they pick on you?
Well, I still take issue with that. Though you keep saying that it wasn't nice, but it's actually, yeah.
I knew you would because you're an attorney.
Right.
You stand on that others, but that's okay. I'm glad. I like controversy.
Right. Because you do admit that what you were doing is not nice, but then you refuse to say that it wasn't anything wrong. So that's the whole thing.
Absolutely nothing wrong, and I don't think it's ever going to stop. It's ever going to stop that people come out with a great product, and the next day somebody's going to come out and infringe on it. It's going to happen every day, and it's going to be on the news every day. And I told you what happened with Costco, and they didn't prosecute that as criminal, which to me, putting a counterfeit item is criminal. That's criminal.
Did Tiffany sue Costco?
They sued him, but, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're an attorney. I'm coming out to your house, and I'm giving you the same product as the other company. But if you went into Tiffany to buy your girlfriend an engagement ring in a big box store like that, you would think it's real. You would never think in a million years it would be counterfeit. It wasn't a mom-and-pop place. So you don't think that they should have criminal charges? No. Civil, yeah, they sued him. Big deal. They settled with, big companies, they settle. Only the small guy gets punished.
We're going to go to a break here in the next minute or so. If you've just joined us, this is Justice for All. I'm George Yates, and we're here with Greg Hall and Dee Thomas. And our guest is David Merkatz, and he's the author of Wrongly Charged, A Look at the Legal System. And we're going to be back after a short break here, and we'll spend the next few minutes here with Mr. Merkatz talking about his book and his next book.
If finances are holding you back from enrolling your kids or grandkids in private Christian schools, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several schools on the peninsula and the south side that allows us to offer a 35% discount off tuition for preschool through the 12th grade. Give us a call today at 488-1010 or visit our website at tuitionsolution.org. Did we mention we added daycares to the site? tuitionsolution.org.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads. They specialize in vinyl design shirts, apparel, window stickers, cups, and other specialty gifts. They also have rhinestone and embroidery designed apparel, and they offer Pandora-style beads and hardware to create a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more caters to businesses, sports teams, churches, groups, and family reunions. They also offer a great fundraising package should you be in need of money for a special project. And they also do home parties if you and your friends would like to get together and make your own creations. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more can be reached at 757-255-9140. That's 757-255-9140. Email them at rmdesigns11@aol.com or find them on Facebook at RM Twisted Designs. You can also place orders directly off their store at storeenvy.com/RM Twisted Designs.
Hi, this is Greg Bigovaris. Join me for Sports Scene each Wednesday from noon to 1 right here on News Talk 1650 WHKT. You can also hear the show on TuneIn as well. We will talk to local, regional, and nationally acclaimed sports guests, and we'll interact with our audience as well at Greg Bick on Twitter. Sports Scene, Wednesdays from noon to 1 right here on 1650 AM.
Okay, we're back with Justice for All, and we've got 30 minutes to go in our show today, and thank you for joining us today. This is K-Talk Radio 1650 AM, and I'm George Yates. I'm here with Greg Hall, and we've been interviewing David Merkatz, the author of Wrongly Charged, A Look at the Legal System. And your book, you've dedicated your book to trying to change the law with regard to loser pays. And I will say this, that I've had many a wrongly charged person that asks me, wow, after this is all over, can I get my attorney's fees back?
Right.
And I have to tell them, well, no. And in fact, of course, we don't even have a loser pay system in the civil either. So many times people just end up having to eat attorney's fees. And that's why it's just so cost prohibitive for anybody to go to court anymore unless there's somebody paying for it, whether there's insurance or something like that. But it is a shame that sometimes people do get charged with something they flat didn't do it. It's cost them $1,000. They got to come into court, defend themselves. There is no mechanism for them to be paid for their, and there is nothing in the law anywhere in any of this 50 states, as far as I know, where a wrongly charged criminal defendant, gets his money back for his attorney's fees. But there are some people that have been compensated. Some of these wrongly convicted capital murder type people that have been exonerated by DNA. Some of them have received compensation, but they have to sue and they've got to go through the process.
And some of them haven't. I mean, spending 15, 16 years in jail and getting out and then getting nothing in return for it.
Yeah, they get nothing. And that's what David's talking about, though, is actually getting attorney's fees. We're talking about compensating people for time they've actually served.
Right.
These are people that were wrongfully convicted, but I'm talking about the people that, let's say, go to trial. I mean, it happens all the time that we'll go to trial on a case, and we go all the way through to a jury trial, and jury acquits. And at the end of the day, client walks out, and it's cost him thousands of dollars in attorney's fees and lost wages from work and time and all that. He doesn't get compensated by the state for that.
And reputation.
Yep. So how do you expect to change the laws, David, to the criminal defendants get paid or get their attorney's fees paid by the government? That's never going to happen.
Well, don't ever say never. Things, they never thought that we'd be so dependent on computers today that the world can't go on without them. No, something's got to be done because, it's not fair that a prosecutor or a cop can just decide, you know what, I'm going to charge this person with burglary of an occupied dwelling and this and that, when in his heart he knew that wasn't the case. He doesn't get reprimanded for it. When he knew in his heart what the case was, now you have to bond out and pay a bondsman 10%, which is almost $2,000, pay an attorney a retainer, which you're never going to see back, even when the charges are downfiled. Very few, unless you happen to get a nice guy. If they take a $15,000 retainer and the charges are downfiled, okay, you lost $15,000. What if they're dismissed? Imagine getting arrested and charged with a sexual crime, and the charges are dismissed. Now, that's on your record. Forever.
Yeah, but it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What you're trying to say is, here's the thing: you've got you're assuming that you've got prosecutors and police that have these malicious motives, and I don't see that as often as you're trying to make it out. When a prosecutor or a police officer files a case against somebody, I've been doing this a long time. They might be wrong. They might actually not be. They might have the wrong guy. They might have they might not have a strong enough case to prove it. But what you're saying is you've got a prosecutor that brings a case, and because they can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, that doesn't mean that it was wrongly brought in the first place. It just means they couldn't prove it. Why would we have to then give the defendant his money back just because the government just couldn't quite prove the case?
Well, most of the time that's not the case, but most of the time what happens is it's not the prosecutor that's so much at fault. It's because the problem is it's the police officer. Most of the time you get arrested and the police officer puts on a bunch of charges, and then you know how it works. You sit for 30 days, and then they file the formal charges. And 80% of the time, the formal charges are never what the police officer charged you with. They can up-file it or down-file, but most of the time it's not exactly. Even like in my cases, before they even filed it, they dropped one of the charges. And, I had to bond out based on those charges. And, I don't get any of that money back. And before they do, and, the problem is in my case, it doesn't happen in every case. They were well aware this was not a criminal matter. I mean, they took this guy and knocked him to the floor and charged him with burglary of an occupied dwelling. Did they really think they were going to go in front of a jury and say, well, we wouldn't have opened up the door if he would have said he was this company? That's their only defense in the burglary charge. And the guy would have stood up in court and he would have said, listen, I work for 10 different companies, and I don't know the names of every single one on the top of my head. Do you really think the jury would have come back and said, well, we're going to let him get burglary of an occupied? But they would have lost the case.
Yeah, it does. It does look like, and the reason was because he was an independent, and he had no knowledge of any of this scam that you were pulling. He did?
Oh, of course, they all had knowledge. Because let me explain something to you. I'm not the only one that does this. That's the thing we didn't even hit on. There were other companies that were doing exactly the same thing as me. Exactly. They're from the Middle East. They come to Florida because there's no licensing regulations here that governs that addresses how you have to advertise the name that's on your corporation. Like up in New York where I'm from, if you have a company, you have a consumer affairs license. You can only advertise that name. If you want to advertise another name, you have to file it with the licensing division and get it approved. Here we don't have that. And it's not my fault that we don't have that. So I followed the law. They said, I called up the Department of State and said exactly what I was going to do. They said, just file a fictitious name, and as long as you have the fictitious name filed, I could have even filed it the same name, which I didn't do. But I'm just saying the laws are very lax here. It's not my fault that they have, those kind of laws, and they allow it to happen. And people were doing it. They're still doing it today. There's companies copying the same exact names that I did and changing it around just a little bit. And people were copying my legitimate name. But I didn't call the police because what if the police would have told me it's a civil matter? I can't come and arrest somebody for using your name unless it's your personal name.
Well, isn't there an supposedly an Israeli billionaire that kind of started that whole ball rolling in Florida with the locksmith?
Well, see, that's what the problem was. Like you had said before, the big companies were the ones that were putting in the Google ads. The big companies weren't the ones that they don't care about Google. These Israelis came down here, and they took a 50-cent Google click, which was affordable to all of the legitimate locksmiths, and they had to be number one. So 3 or 4 of them were not. Today, to be in the top cities in Florida, if you're sitting down, it's $40 to $60 a click, okay? And they don't care because when they come out to your house, they advertise on the internet, $19 service call, and when you get done with them, they're the ones that should be charged with burglary, because your bill is $800 when they get done for 2 locks to be rekeyed. And this is what's been going on here. But they haven't been able to do anything about it because there's no regulations. The bill keeps dying every time they put it through. So those were the ones that really created me to do what I did, because I couldn't advertise on Google because I was like at the bottom of the page because these guys were bidding $40 and $50 a click. It wasn't the legitimate companies that were hurting everybody. It was these people that came down, said, Florida's the place to come. There's no licensing. Anybody that knows how to take a screwdriver, take a lock off a door, and these were butchers, were going out and doing locks. And they were killing me. They were killing even the legitimate companies. They were losing business to it. It was all over the news quite often. So that's what caused me to say, what are we going to do to get some business here? I can't go on Google. Yellow pages are used by people 55 and older, or, today, very few people pick up a phone book. So, and they were selling the locks in the big box stores retail for what we paid for them wholesale. So it really was a terrible thing that happened to the businesses.
Yeah, you basically, your whole locksmith business just dried up. And now you're a legal author. What's your next book going to be?
Actually, the next book is interesting. It's going to be Life After a Conviction. The average, yes, because
what a felon goes through.
I go into a little detail on how to seal and expunge, but the next book is going to have every law in every state on how, if you can't seal and expunge, because unfortunately there are some states you can have a pardon or civil rights. It's pretty easy to do. People make it like it's a big job. I've done it for a lot. I actually should have been an attorney. I've represented, without being an attorney, quite a few people and helped them, while I was writing the book, seal and remove charges that were against them, which I feel Florida should remove. If a case is dismissed, you shouldn't have to use your one and only seal or an expunge when they dismiss. It should only be on a withheld. So you have a charge of, let's say, sexual assault. The defendant lied. Okay, it's dismissed. Go get a job now. You go to work for a place and they bring up your record, arrested for rape, charge dismissed. Would you hire him? People don't realize that happens to people all the time.
You can get those expunged if he's been found not guilty or the charge was dismissed or null pros. You can get that expunged.
Not in every state.
Well, you certainly can in Virginia.
Yeah, you can in Florida, but here's the problem. You can only seal or expunge in a lifetime, no matter what state you're in, one time. So, for example...
No, it's not true.
Well, that's Florida law. Only one. It's a one-time only.
No, if somebody's charged, let's say, with assault and battery this month, and then it gets the charge dismissed in 3 months, they could move to have that expunged, and then let's say in 3 years they're charged with, let's say driving under the influence, they get the charge dismissed, they could get that expunged as well. There's no, there's no one-shot deal.
Well, they did change the law. If you read the statute 948 in Florida, and it specifically states that it's a one-time thing. You can't, and if you have one expunged, you can't seal the other, and it doesn't matter. For example, if my case in New York, which New York is a non-expungement state, was sealed, and I applied to have a case sealed in Florida that was dismissed, they won't do it. It happened, because I know it happened. I did try to help somebody with that.
Yeah, but you've got convictions. Here's the problem. A lot of times, see, in Virginia, and even though I'm licensed in Florida, I'm not qualified to give legal advice from Florida because I don't practice there enough. But Here, if you're going to, even if you want to get something expunged in Virginia, you have to show that there's going to be a manifest injustice to you if that charge remains on your record. So, for instance, let's say you come in and you're charged with a felony, and the government comes in and you made a statement and you admitted to doing it, but for whatever reason, that statement is not admitted in court. And so because your statement can't be admitted in court, the charges can't be proved against you, so the government comes in and dismisses the charge. You are not going to be able to get that charge expunged because it's not that you were actually innocent. The charge was dismissed, but it was on a technicality. Or another example, there's another example. Let's say that you have a deferred finding like the one that you've got right now. That's going to be dismissed off your record in 2017 or whenever. Correct. You can't come in and get that expunged later in Virginia because you can only get those charges expunged where the charges were dismissed and you were actually innocent of the charge. And because you have to show there's a manifest injustice for that to remain on your record. And how can it be an injustice for something to remain on your record when the only reason it was dismissed was because there was a technicality about the statement? Or why would it be an injustice for it to remain on your record when, in fact, it gets dismissed, but not because you weren't not guilty, but because you pled guilty and they put you on probation and you were a good boy and kept your nose clean and didn't break the law, and 3 years later it gets dismissed. So you don't get those charges expunged because you're not actually innocent. And so for you, and I'm not trying to weigh in on all of your legal issues in New York and Florida and so on, but if you've already been convicted of other offenses, sometimes a judge might say, how is it a manifest injustice for this dismissal to remain on his record when in fact the person has other charges that might be related to this particular charge? I don't find that to be such an injustice for this particular person. Whereas, let's say this other person that's never been charged with any kind of crime in their whole life, and it's this one blip on their record, and that might be more of an injustice to them because they have a clean record. So it's a case-by-case basis. Sometimes when you're trying to do an expungement, it's different all across Hampton Roads. For instance, in Virginia Beach, it's a fairly simple matter. The prosecutors will just sign the orders. In other cities, like in Chesapeake and in Newport News, they'll require an actual court hearing on all these expungements because judges want to look at them sometimes and say, hey.
See, the other laws are much stricter. But see, did they offer sealing there?
Well, no, it's not a sealing process. It's
in
just
Florida, you have two options. Option one is an expungement.
And what's the grounds for sealing?
Sealing, let me tell you something. You do not even have to go to court. Okay, you file in Florida. If it's a withheld adjudication and you've never had secured a sealing before, that has to be the number one criteria. You've never had a case sealed or expunged in any state or jurisdiction. Okay, now let's say forget about the other things from the pay. Let's say this was the only charge I had, the petty theft charge. I can, after it's done with, like you said, I can file. I wouldn't even bother with an expungement. I would go for a sealing because a sealing you don't need a state attorney approval, even though they can't deny it. Judges don't hear those things in Florida on sealing at all. You go to the state of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. You pay a $75 fee. They do a search on you. Make sure you've never secured a sealing, and it was a withheld or a dismissal, either one. It doesn't matter. And they will give you what's called a certificate of eligibility. I've done it for a relative. And once you have the certificate of eligibility, you're better off doing it with an attorney because they know how to file. You don't even have to go to court. You just give the paper to the judge, and he rubber stamps it, and within 3 weeks the case is sealed. And you can lawfully deny that you were ever arrested, and you can get any license you want. That's Florida law.
Well, that makes no sense. What's the point of having a record?
There's no record of it. I did it for a relative, and she went for a job, and they asked if she was ever arrested. They said nope, and they pulled it up. No record of the. And in fact,
well, that doesn't happen here, and for good reason.
Well, yeah,
Why
Virginia
would you have
must
a
be
record?
stricter. But Florida goes even one further. If an employer denies somebody that has a case sealed, and they find out through some private, company that didn't seal it off their record, they can be sued. Because that's the Florida law. If a case is sealed, you can lawfully deny or fail to acknowledge. That's exactly the way it's worded, even the arrest. And sealing is very easy here. Very easy. You don't even have to get a state attorney signature on it.
So you say you spoke to Barry Scheck personally?
I spoke to his associate, and to get permission to put him in the book and teach. He was very happy about it.
Yeah, we've had a lot of the Innocence Project folks on
They do
over
such
time.
good. I mean, I watched a show on Inside Edition about a month ago where a woman just got out of, I believe it was a California jail that she spent almost her whole life in, and it was a mistake. And
Why don't you, in the next few minutes, if you just joined us, we're here, this is Justice for All, and we've got just a few more minutes with David Merkatz. Why don't you spend some time in the next few minutes, David, telling us about some of these people that were wrongfully convicted. You have a really cool chapter on that in your book.
Well, basically what I did is...
Who's your favorite one of all of the people that you documented that were wrongfully convicted?
I don't even remember. I wrote so many of them. There was a black guy, one of them that died, I think, in Florida. And they found out unfortunately after he died, that the DNA, and it's terrible. I mean, I see it every day. I mean, I have my website is full of people. I keep posting articles of people that get arrested and evidence planted, and then they, I keep clipping newspapers every day and showing what's going on. How unfortunately, and it's scary, But the wrongfully convicted is even worse. To actually spend time in jail when you know you didn't do something wrong and sit there for 15 years. I'm going to be on a show on Monday night in Las Vegas that there's actually the co-host spent 16 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. So I'm sure he's going to love to have me.
Well, listen, we're gonna let you go. I know you got a busy afternoon there in Broward County. We've spent the last almost 2 hours here with David Merkatz. He's the author of Wrongfully Charged: A Look at the Legal System, documenting his travails after being arrested for running a little locksmith scam on some of his competitors. And it's been really a pleasure having you, David. Good luck with the book.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, great. So we're going to let you go, and thank you very much to David Merkatz. And then we're going to spend the next few minutes here just talking about this this guest. That was pretty fun, wasn't it, Greg?
He's a character. So in looking at it, you can't help but agree with some of the things that he says. But I think a lot of people are going to say, we all know business owners, local business owners, spend years building a reputation in the community. And when you hear about something like this, there's just something inside of you that just says this is wrong, right? And he's saying what he did was not nice, but it was within the confines of the law. So,
He refused to. He kept saying it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't nice. But every lawyer that he went to see said, well, you can be sued. So if you can be sued for it, it means that you're doing something that's civilly wrong. It might not be criminally wrong, but it's wrong. But he had a real issue. If something was civilly wrong, it was just sort of okay because it goes on all the time.
Right. And I think, and he pointed out that there are bigger companies that do these kinds of things. And there are certainly, I think that when you do have bigger companies, it's typically a lawsuit with civil lawyers, and there's some kind of settlement that comes out of it. Money, hey, this happened, and we're gonna pay. This touches home because people don't feel as connected to a large company as they do to, hey, I know a guy like this that's a business owner and everything else, and it doesn't seem like, on the surface when I think about it, I was like, well, I don't like what happened, but they didn't burglarize places that they went and did the locksmith work for. I mean, there were no, criminal charges as far as that was concerned. And
well, it was an economic crime, and
right.
Nobody was harmed, and there were no weapons, and so you don't go to jail for these kinds of things. At worst, you plead guilty to some. I don't think that what he did was the most egregious thing in the world, and people weren't. But the funny thing about all of it is the name of his book is Wrongfully Charged: A Look at the Legal System. And I read the book, and I got all the way to the end under the conclusion. He goes, well, it's a no-brainer that I was going to plead to these 6 misdemeanors and get a withhold adjudication and get it dismissed in 3 years if I was a good boy. Well, we do this all the time, of course, as lawyers, we'll have somebody work out a kind of a deal with the prosecutor where it wasn't the most serious crime in the world. It might start out as a felony, breaks it down to a misdemeanor, gives you a withhold. We call them deferred findings. And the client can get the charge dismissed in a year or so. They're not going to get it expunged, but it will get dismissed. But those are for people but those people were rightly charged. When they pled guilty to that misdemeanor, they were ecstatic that they got the misdemeanor because they'd been rightly charged actually with the felony. And, as a lawyer, you've done a great job because, okay, I'm getting you a misdemeanor and a withhold. They're not saying, oh, I was wrongfully charged. They're saying, wow, great, we're getting out of it. Okay, thank you very much. This guy goes and writes a book. Instead of saying, gee, I'm really stoked that I didn't get convicted of a felony, money laundering, burglary, all these things. I'm getting out of it. He goes and writes a book and says, I'm wrongfully charged.
Wrongfully charged.
But he said, I was afraid to go to a jury. I mean, he says in the book, I'm afraid to go to a jury. Well, because I think there might be business people on that jury that might convict me and so on and so forth. So how wrongfully charged could he really have been? But once again, we have people that plead guilty to misdemeanors all the time. I've done it before with people where, and I wasn't there when his lawyer, Tyler Harding, was giving him advice. Say, listen, David, here's your choice. You can go to this trial, and the prosecutor is going to try to hit you with these 3 felonies. You might get convicted of 1 or more. Here's a misdemeanor. You plead guilty to it now. You get it off your record in 3 years. You don't have to pay any more attorney's fees. What do you do? And he says, I don't think I did anything criminally wrong, Mr. Lawyer. And the lawyer says, well, I don't either, but I can't guarantee you what this jury's going to do. So what's your choice? You want to take this misdemeanor plea now and get a guarantee off your record in 3 years, or take your chances of a felony? Plus, you're going to pay me another whatever. You said the lawyer was going to charge him $20,000. That sounds like a high fee, but jury trial on 3 felonies in Florida Circuit Court, yeah, maybe that's what that lawyer was going to charge him. So,
right. And he brought up another point that we talked about last week, and that was, when you're, with the plea agreements that, or going to trial, you don't know what the jury doesn't know the sentencing. So
well, right.
If they find you guilty, and I think that would factor into a jury's mentality if they were looking and saying, well, this isn't serious enough to do 10 years in jail.
Yeah, but in Florida, the judge would do the sentencing. See, we were talking about this. Okay. In Virginia now, you really do have to worry about that, because if you go to a jury trial in Virginia and the jury convicts you, they set the sentence. But in Florida, see, he could have gone to that jury and still walked out, or if they'd convicted, a judge would have sentenced. But, after you go through this whole thing with this guy, I mean, he's got quite a colorful history of shooting out windshields and so that he could get business for his glass company, putting glue in the locks of the businesses that, stiffed him on his fees, whatever the thing with the Department of Transportation is. And this scam on the website is still, you can't compete legitimately. And so you pull this scam on your competitors. I mean, you don't have a whole lot of sympathy for this guy.
No, not at all, and definitely don't.
I don't go, oh, you poor boy, you were dragged through the legal system of Florida, you were so wrongfully charged.
And it sounds like he doesn't expect you to have that kind of concern for him either. It seems like he's a bit of a realist where that's concerned, and so it's going to be, there are going to be other interviews with him. He's on the circuit, and I'm going to pay attention and see how some of these people handle it.
I wonder how his book is selling. Wrongly charged: A Look at the Legal System by David Merkatz. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, he was one of our more colorful people to come on.
And hey, the show is Justice for All, and we do talk about where the legal lines cross with pop culture, and it's funny because I kind of just doing some due diligence there at the end, kind of found a few things that certainly he was I think upfront about once we brought it out on the air.
I wanted to say from the get-go that I don't have any problem with the government in this particular case going after him, even though it was kind of a close call on whether he was committing a crime. Because I do think that the taxpayers do kind of expect the the local district attorney's office to protect legitimate businesses from this kind of stuff. Because when you really think about it, he had said how private he was, and he wasn't the guy going out and doing it. So there was really no way. I mean, unless if you're a business like ABC Locksmith, how in the world are you're going to go out and employ investigators and police and all of that to go out and try to find out who in the world is ripping you off like this? So they call the police department. The police department says, this is a legitimate type fraud situation, especially it's a locksmith that's gaining entry to people's homes in this way. Maybe we should just charge this and stop this behavior. So I can't really say that this was not a legitimate exercise of government power to pop this guy. And then, okay, they slapped him on the wrist. They gave him a withhold. And he stopped it. He stopped this behavior. And I would guess that putting it on the front page of the paper made other people kind of think twice before they kind of scammed people with websites. So I can't say that he was... after reading this book and hearing from him for 2 hours, I can't really conclude that he was wrongly charged. I'm sorry, I just can't.
Well, that's why when I posted it on some of the social media outlets, I put wrongfully charged or just plain wrong.
But I do like him as a guest, and I respect what he said about, and it might well be that the charges were pushing it legally, criminally, as to go after him. But it was a lot of fun having him on the show. If you were with us today for the whole 2 hours, thank you very much. If you just heard the last few minutes, this is Justice for All. And we're here, and we've been here with Wrongly Charged, a look at the legal system with David Merkatz. Please join us next week from 2 to 4 for another edition of Justice for All. Have a great afternoon. Bye now.
CBS News, I'm Deborah Rodriguez. A day after a critic of Vladimir Putin was shot near the Kremlin, there appear to be no leads into his death, at least not publicly. Sky News reporter Joanna Simpson with more on the late opposition leader Boris Nemtsov.
Nemtsov was openly critical of Vladimir Putin. Speaking just hours before he was killed, he made his feelings on the current regime and its dealings in Ukraine clear.
The country needs a political reform. When power is concentrated in the hands of one person and this person rules forever, this will lead to an absolute catastrophe. Absolute.
Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko claims Nemtsov was murdered because of information he was about to release directly linking Russia to separatists in eastern Ukraine. An hour before a youth hockey team was scheduled to start practice, the roof collapsed at a skating rink in Canton, Massachusetts. Kids were still in the locker room. WBZ reporter Kim Tunnicliffe.
Fire Chief Charles Duty says it is a miracle that everyone got out safely. The roof collapsed at the Metropolis rink in Canton, and it affected the back corner of the building, which is now completely caved in.
A buildup of snow on the roof, the suspected cause. Another blast of Arctic air brought record low temperatures to the Midwest and Northeast today. Tomorrow, they'll get snow.
As snow spreads out of the plains towards the Ohio Valley, we expect the potential for 4 to 8 inches of plus of snow from the St. Louis area eastward to near Indianapolis, Columbus, and then over to Pittsburgh.
Forecaster Bob Oravec at the National Weather Service. An appeals court in Boston has denied a fourth request to move the trial of the suspected Boston Marathon bomber out of Boston. CBS News senior legal analyst Andrew Cohen.
Defense attorneys had argued that venue had to be changed because jury selection was proving that jurors had made up their minds about Tsarnaev, that he was guilty, and that the iconic crime couldn't be separated from the city in which it occurred. Prosecutors had argued the jurors were claiming to keep open minds about the defendant, and for the appeals court, that was enough.
Opening arguments are scheduled to get underway midweek. 15 tons, an awful lot of pot. But that's how much federal authorities say they seized at a border crossing into Southern California inside a truck carrying mattresses and cushions. The LA Times puts the value at nearly $19 million. Second largest border seizure ever. He was a basketball great.
The 6'7" Anthony Mason going up against Akeem Olajuwon. And
Olajuwon continues to have problems with Mason.
Former NBA forward Anthony Mason, who played for 6 different teams, has died at the age of 48. His son says he suffered a heart attack after several recent surgeries. New York Knicks president Phil Jackson, who coached the Chicago Bulls while Mason played for the Knicks in the 90s, says that as a competitor, there was none fiercer than Anthony Mason. And he's credited with transforming women's wear daily from a trade publication into an international fashion force. John B. Fairchild has died. He was 87. This is CBS News.
If you have Medicare Part D, Walgreens can put you at the corner of switching your prescriptions and saving some money. That's because Walgreens makes it easy to switch and save with copays as low as $0 on select Medicare Part D plans. Just bring us your prescriptions and we'll do the rest. Switch to save even more today. Walgreens, at the corner of happy and healthy.
Applies to Tier 1 generics for select plans.
Geico Motorcycle presents Reflections from the Road.
Let me tell you, the road is a much more relaxing place since I switched to Geico Motorcycle Insurance and started saving money. With that taken care of, now I can think about deep, important things. Like how come it's a pair of pants when there's only one of them? A real brain teaser. But hey, at least saving money with Geico Motorcycle is as easy as pie. What does that mean, anyway?
Geico Motorcycle Insurance. See how much you could save.
If you choose a book by its title, this one's for you.
A contest that revels in judging a book by its cover has just revealed its shortlist for the oddest book title of the year. Competing for the Diagram Prize is Nature's Nether Regions, about the evolution of genitals. There's also the menopausal memoir, The Mad Woman in the Volvo, My Year of Raging Hormones. If you're looking for a practical guide for ending a pagan relationship, Divorcing a Real Witch may be it. Or how about a sex expose of Maoist China entitled The Ugly Wife is Treasured at Home? This is considered the strongest field in decades. Larry Miller, CBS News, London.
There's a bizarre food mashup headed to the breakfast table. Taco Bell and Cap'n Crunch say they've teamed up to make donut holes filled with milk icing from deep-fried Cap'n Crunch berries and cereal crumbs. Food Beast says the product is being test marketed in Bakersfield, California right now. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS.